Hey everybody, welcome to Off the Lot. I'm Ken Kabatop.
And I'm Anthony Epp, and we are here to take a deep dive into the world of independent filmmaking and really get into the nuts and bolts of how to make your movies on your own terms.
With the Hollywood landscape changing so quickly, now is the time to become your own gatekeeper. And with this podcast, we'll explore exactly what that looks like. So be sure to like, follow, or subscribe. And if you like something you hear, share it with your friends. It really, really helps us out, and we want to grow that community and bring everybody on board. So let's dive in. Anthony, it has been a week since we launched our first episode, and from what I can tell, the response has been really positive. It's been great to hear from
Yeah,
everybody. Yeah, so thank you to everybody for tuning in, and we have so much more to talk about over the next weeks, months, and hopefully years of doing this. And so obviously,
till the
like
internet goes away.
exactly, we're going to be around for a while. But we've been pretty busy over the last week dealing with the podcast, but also, just juggling our film lives and our film careers, and we each have so much going on. And I'm actually just curious, Anthony, like what are you working on these days?
Starting off, I've got right now working on three projects. One is obviously the Quiet Canadians, which is our film production company's movie that we're in development on, and we've been working on the telefilm application. Lots of fun, and we're enjoying it and putting that all together. And then I also have another feature that I am producing with Helena, and that is supposed to go into pre-production in February, with shooting set for mid March. So we're putting all the pieces of that together, and actually we'll be working on a vertical series at the beginning of February as well as a production manager. So lots of hats in the air right now.
Yeah, you're wearing a lot of hats. Yeah. But that's part of being an indie filmmaker and like just working in film in general, and what we were talking about before about this is the second gig economy, right? Everybody has
Yeah,
multiple plates spinning, and we're no different, right? We're not just
we're no different.
one thing in this industry. We're
Yeah,
writers, we're directors, we're producers, we're production managers, and that's what it takes to
multi
succeed.
hyphenated. What
Exactly.
about you?
Yeah, I'm sort of in the same boat. I'm I'm also a TV writer and trying to push the TV writing side of things further along as much as possible. So along with indie film, I have two TV shows that are gearing up to pitch, that I'm gearing up to pitch very, very soon. That those ones would be down in LA. I have a Canadian series, a pilot that I'm about to start writing, a new pilot script that I'm waiting to get notes back on from my agents, and then that will go out as well. And then on the indie side of things, I have a feature, which would be my directorial debut. And so we're just starting to go out to private investors like right now, as of this week. And with that film as a backup plan, or who knows, maybe it'll be the A plan. We are going to telefilm as well for the telefilm production program grant, just like you are with your film. And so we were working on that application. We're wrapping that up and then hoping to submit that January 30th.
It's a busy start to 2025, that's for sure.
It is. It's
Which
been
is
very
good. Which
busy.
is good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. It's great. I mean, I love being busy. I hate not having something to do. The worst time for me is when I finish a project and I'm not sure what I want to work on next. That's like a very
Yeah.
low point where I'm like, I just feel aimless and I need to be working on something. So this podcast has actually been, a welcome surprise, actually.
Mhm. Yeah, it's hard to imagine that, when we first sat down to chat about this, that all of a sudden we already have one episode out, in the world, and this second one already, in the queue.
I mean, 3 weeks ago, this podcast did not exist. We were having coffee talking about
Yeah,
the year and
exactly.
what we're working on, literally having this conversation, basically. And
Yeah.
now we have a podcast out into the world, and I can't be more excited. Speaking of the podcast, actually, we're very excited about this week's episode because we're doing something a little bit differently. We are interviewing some filmmakers, and we're super stoked about their movie. It has not been released yet. But this is going to be a thing that we do moving forward, where sometimes episodes will just be Anthony and I talking about certain aspects of filmmaking, and other episodes will be interviews with directors, writers, producers, actors, department heads, you name it, working in indie film. Some of them actually working on big budget Hollywood productions that also do indies on the side. So it'll be a really nice mix of people. But today, the filmmakers that we have the film that they made really embodies the thesis of what this podcast is about. They became their own gatekeepers and they produced a micro budget horror film that is now with a distributor and it's soon to be released. And so, anybody that doesn't know what a micro budget feature is, generally speaking, it's a film that's produced for less than $250,000. And these guys made theirs for only $30,000, which is an incredible feat to pull off.
Yeah, the film is called The Stickman's Hollow, and it's a unique found footage horror film that's just incredibly creative and well executed. The synopsis reads: ranging from Norway in the 1990s to a small North American town in the present day, the Stickman's Hollow takes an unflinching look at a bizarre series of murders committed by Clara Hall, a child allegedly suffering from demonic possession. The film's told in four parts, all separate accounts of found footage that chronicle the victims' stories: a young family on a fishing trip, a priest's attempt to exorcise Clara Hall, a pagan cult in Norway, a grieving family in search of the unrecovered bodies. As we witness the characters' disturbing accounts, the story of how Clara Hall became a possessed comes to light, and we slowly realize the heinous truth behind the Stickman's Hollow.
And so we had a great conversation with the director Jack Cox and producer Cole Hewlett, and we really got into how exactly they managed to pull off this story with such a small budget. So we talked about everything from development to production to landing a distributor. And as an indie filmmaker, it's conversations like these that I find really inspiring and motivating because it just highlights that making your feature is totally within reach. So without further ado, here's our chat with Jack and Cole from The Stickman's Hollow. Here we go, guys. Thanks for joining us on Off the Lot. So, we'd love to basically dive right into who you are and your film, The Stickman's Hollow. I think your film really encapsulates like the thesis of this podcast, which is be your own gatekeeper and don't ask for permission to make your own movie. And, the way that you guys pulled this off and put it all together, that's something we really just want to learn more about and talk about and just sort of have you take us through the whole process from beginning to end and tell us what's going to happen next with the film. But to start first, it would be great to just learn a little bit more about who you are and how you got into film and how you got to this point. Jack, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Well, I met Cole down in film school back in 2007, and we had a lot of fun working together. After Capilano University, I went down south to the States and did a degree down in San Francisco. And then I came back to Vancouver looking for a job and wound up in animation as a coordinator. And then I moved into voice directing that for the performances. So yeah, I started mostly working not in on sets, but in animation with storyboards and performers, and did that for about 10 years. And then Hewlett and I started going, oh gosh, we need to make our own stuff here.
That's interesting. How did you go from film school to animation? Was that something you always wanted to do?
Yeah, I did. I animated a lot of my own projects in school after working at CAP, which was like an on-screen thing. And I did a little bit of writing work for New Horizons, which is Roger Corman's old company in LA. Yeah, like writing awful dialogue on awful movies that I don't know if they ever saw the light of day. I hope they didn't. And that's what got me started in like low budget horror and seeing what some of those guys in San Francisco were doing with limited budgets and just making it because they could. Yeah, and then it was like a 10-year diversion through animation, working with performers and writing dialogue. And I was pitching stuff along the way and working as a writer here and there when people would let me. But yeah, and then Hewlett and I said, we just got to make our own stuff. At a certain point, you just kind of go, no one's letting you through unless you make it something like a physical copy to shove in people's faces. So
That's great. That's really interesting. And yeah, I totally agree. You just got to make it yourself, right? And
yeah.
Yeah.
and Cole, how did you then, you guys met in film school, but
Well, like,
what's your journey? How did you get into
like
this?
Jack said, we met in film school, and then pretty much right after film school, jumped into production and was on a bunch of different PAs, Supernatural, the whole gamut of like all the Vancouver locals. Had a really good experience on Percy Jackson, The Lightning Thief, the first film, and was a PAing on that. And then from there, just kind of worked my way up into the office. was working on different shows in the office, working at Front Street, bouncing on MOWs, just through connections through film school. And then along the way, while I'm doing that, always checking in with friends and trying to do short films and creating different things with other people from film school and communicating with Jack. Jack and I started developing things together. We had this whole idea before even getting into horror about a comedy series about a man in the wilderness, and trying to get that off the ground, pitching it to a bunch of people, just not working, trying to rework that, working in the industry, getting more and more coordinating gigs, finally getting into like bigger, different things, working on Mike Flanagan stuff to alter carbon, then just hit it off with Mike Flanagan the last couple years on like Haunting of Bly Manor, haunting not Haunting of Hill House, but like after seeing Haunting of Hill House, really wanting to work with Mike, and
Mhm.
then getting to work on Haunting of Bly Manor, Midnight Mass, Midnight Club, and then The Fall of the House of Usher. Before Mike decided, he's like, think Vancouver. I've had enough of Vancouver. I'm gonna go down to LA for a bit some more. And that time we were working on like different short films. And I think when we really like came together for like this horror film was Jack was working on Run and Gun with Hunter. He was doing Dirty Sally, and I was doing Love You Mama, and with Alex Magistro, which is Mike Flanagan's assistant. And we were at VFS, and I think both of our films were in it at the same time. And we're like, we should do one together. We should make a short film together, like a horror short film. And
So
that
both of
came.
your crews were shooting at the same time at the VFS campus, and that's when you
No,
realized this?
sorry, it's not VFS, Vancouver Horror Show. Like both of
Oh, okay.
our shorts were showing there. I think like we were both like, hey, we should combine forces and like make a short.
Yeah.
And then Jack came up with a brilliant idea of these cat like these people in the woods, and they were being chased by this demonic presence, and we're not really sure what's going on. I think Jack could better describe the short film Clara a bit more. And from Clara was kind of like the genesis of Stickman's Hollow. So once we shot Clara, we're like, holy shit, this is a great idea. We can make this maybe into a feature.
Interesting. So, okay, so you had the kernel of an idea, but then it became a short film first before this feature, Stickman's Hollow. So tell us about Clara.
Yeah, Clara. So, like you had said, myself and Hunter, our other producer, we'd been working on a ton of goofier, funnier stuff. And Dirty Sally was a short that we did that sort of strayed into darker, more macabre territory. And then we linked up with Hewlett doing I Love You Mama and met at VHS. And then we said, we went to film school with Hunter as well. And the three of us said, "Oh, why don't we start a company and start making some bad horror?" So we thought, okay, well, we'll start with this short, and yeah, we went out into the woods for 2 days and shot this concept. It was found footage. I don't think any of us really knew what we were getting into with found footage at the time, so
Not at all.
we we none of us were really used to
How
that.
how so how so? When you say that you didn't know what you were getting into with found footage, what was the challenge?
From my own perspective, being from animation, where it's everything's created from ground up, it's a much more strict and less loose medium. Hewlett was coming from massive Mike Flanagan sets. So we were all a little bit at first, like aesthetically, a little confused, pacing a little confused, getting those natural performances. It's a very different form of directing. It's really counterintuitive to everything you learn in terms of like the staging, what the camera does, but at the same time, you have to sneak a movie into the aesthetic of it. So we experimented out in the woods for, I think we shot the whole thing in about 1 day. I was kind of up there for 2 days in the woods, kind
Yeah.
of starting. Came back, we put it in a couple festivals. But while I had been out in the woods prepping it, I'd been looking around at locations and trying to figure out how we were going to do it the day before shooting. Kind of went, oh, there's actually a full story here. Like these are this is a really interesting concept, and I
Mm.
kind of fell in love with the found footage idea, which I hadn't really been attracted to before. But there is something really sort of Lovecraftian and weird about it, about trying to assemble all the pieces in between the big story beats to try and tell the story. So yeah, so we made the short, went through a bunch of different artists and found a bunch of great people that we loved, and we flipped them all onto Stickman, and that's how the feature started. And a couple people saw the short too, and that's how we helped raise money and whatnot.
Yeah.
We had kind of intended to put it into a festival called Shits and Giggles, which I think is also run by the Run and Gun by Sasha and Joel. We made something that wasn't really even for them. The short was like 13, 15 minutes long, and then we cut down a version that was like 2 minutes or something insane for Shits and Giggles. But at the Shits and Giggles Festival, it did quite well, and it introduced us to some people who enjoyed it. And it was our first stab at horror. Like Hunter, Cole, and myself had all been doing comedy, or myself, children's television up until this point. So I think when we were sitting in the theater and we saw everyone tense up and get real uncomfortable, I think that was a big thrill for myself, going, oh, wait, there's something pretty, this is pretty fun. This is more fun than making people laugh.
That's great. So it acted as a proof of concept as well to help get your feature off the ground, which is totally, a great tool to be able to do.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't intend for it to be like that at first, but once we all started working together and we saw it in the theater, then it did exactly that. So it was great.
That was the real thing with like Clara is we got out there, didn't know what we were gonna do. It was kind of like a jam session with all these creative people that we had who had a disposal. It was like, how is this gonna work? And it was like free forming. And then seeing how it came along and it progressed throughout the day and structuring this thing and then having a short that comes out of it, being like, oh shit, we all work really well together. We can use this as our basis to build up into a feature. And then with like Jack coming up with these amazing ideas for the feature and like having him kind of piece together what the elements we had are to build around to create the structure of the script and stuff.
And if you are you able to say what was the final budget of the film?
The short was like 100 bucks. Yeah. Was whatever, I think it was
Gas money to the
gas
deep
money. Yeah.
wallet and hot dogs.
Right.
The feature budget is so ethereal in terms of like in kind, private, what we spent. I don't know. That's a real mosaic.
How did you fund what you did need to spend out of your cash spend?
We had some wonderful private investors, as well as a bit of Seed and Spark money, and then we had a crew of absolute freaks who were willing to defer payment in terms of the greater good at times. There were definitely a couple points where we had to float it with our own money in post for a little bit. So we pretty much used, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think we used every single tool possible to
Yeah.
get the film from the woods all the way to distribution.
Well, let's dive into that. As far as development goes, and so you've adapted the short film now, location scouting, crewing up, casting on a $30,000 budget. How did this happen? What was your timeline? How did you know where you wanted to shoot? Tell us all of that.
That's a fun story. Like to begin with that, it's just Jack had this idea and it was just constantly calling, being like, what can we do? What do we have to make this film? And so we'd constantly be assessing what opportunities we had in our toolbox and like what we could access to. Like we knew, okay, we shot the short film up in Squamish in we had this access to this land, but we knew that we didn't really have we wanted to push farther in different locations up in there. We'd have to like contact the band and then we had to contact like Crown Corporation, which would take a lot more longer and like a lot more money. So like, okay, maybe not shoot out in Squamish anymore. And then it was just like finding those things and putting those pieces together and finding what we could afford to do and like what was interesting for the script because I think we went through a few iterations of the script and we were still like even when we were location scouting, I think Jack and Hunter were still coming up with ideas as we were still way into development.
Yeah, we definitely had to pick all our assets that we knew we had in terms of place we could get to, place we could stay. Like getting the whole crew out into the woods was always a bit of a problem. Initially, I wanted to go spend 2 weeks deep in the heart of Squamish in camp, and Hewlett was like, "We're never going to do that. Do that? Yeah, that's insane." And I really pushed for that. I'm thinking that was a reasonable request on a feature, but obviously it was not. And Hewlett was very gentle about coaxing me out of that whole suicide plan. But So everyone survived thanks to Hewlett there. But finding other locations, we wound up shooting in Kelowna, Maple Ridge, Vancouver Island, and off the coast of Vancouver, actually on the ocean.
That's amazing. Wow. Okay.
Wow,
And so
that's
what was your hotel budget?
We had like a very small hotel budget because it was just like taking the actors or the actors that we knew that would come along with us and putting them in hotels when they needed to be. But other than that, it was just the crew who we had like, and the crew would come with us and stay in these places that we were shooting and living in. So like we had a section where in the film where we go up to Kelowna, and why we wanted to go to Kelowna was because Hunter had this house, his family house, and no one was in it. And we're like, okay, this is great. This is a great opportunity to use this house. This is because we had this whole house to ourselves, big property. We could do whatever we want on it. And it also, we were having a hard time finding a creepy basement. We knew we had to have a creepy basement in this film. And Hunter's like, well, I shot this music video with a band I had, and this is the basement. And we took a look at it and like, okay, that's really cool. Well, Hunter was going up there, so we scouted that area, and we are like, the house is amazing. It had, I think, 3 bedrooms, a downstairs that you could house another 3 people to sleep, and a creepy basement that we can shoot in. So, okay, we know that we can shoot a portion of this film at this location. How can we make this work? And is it feasible to bring everyone up? And then after crunching the numbers, you see like, well, I don't have to find a house. There's location cost gone. Like some
Well,
of our
what was the
cast.
total crew size, to give some context here?
Oh, like 7, 8.
Mhm.
It would fluctuate. I think it was like not 3 at the smallest and about 9 or 10 at the biggest.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So we knew, yeah, like coming up to Kelowna, it was very small crew size. Hunter was our DP slash camera operator. I was the AD
Slash lead actor, right?
slash lead actor. Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the leads. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we had Emma, who was also one of our actors, who was also doing makeup and costume for us. She was amazing and so helpful. And then we had me, who was ADing and helping with special effects and doing a bunch of other things. And then we had Jack, who was just focusing on directing and helping wherever we could with like set deck and production design. And we had Nancy, who was our amazing sound person, who like we lucked out finding Nancy, who just came on board and was an amazing trooper.
Yeah. Like, it goes
Yeah,
such a long way, right? Yeah.
yeah,
How many days did you film this over? And I'm imagining it because you were in so many different actual geographical locations. That did you do this all at once, or
yeah.
you
Yeah,
did?
we did. We shot
Wow.
for
That
11
was
days, 11 days straight.
Yeah. I worked on a feature film called No Man Beyond This Point, where we shot over 2 years on weekends, and like we structured it every once in a while, and we'd have a big blocks coming in. But I working on that, we realized that you kind of like lose momentum and then have to pick the momentum up again. And so I was like, no, no, no. If we can just like get people's time for this amount of time and just really focus in and get everyone on board for this, then we can really get this done in the time that we needed to get this done.
Yeah, and what made that possible was a lot of sifting through crew to find real Swiss Army knives. I think we probably spent more time finding the right people than we did on script development or budgeting, because we knew to get it done on Hewlett's schedule, which was brilliant given all the different locations. We did have to find quite a special ops crew that would be willing to, like, we stuck everybody in the same house that was the location. We took them out into the middle of the wilderness. We did night shoots in deep dark cold. The versatility of the crew's jobs and how we all got along was how we did it, really.
You ended up getting a bunch of people that love to make movies, first of all, and again, you're like, hey, we're not going to pay you very much. It's going to be an intense 11-day shoot. We're all going to live together on the set that we're shooting on. and but it's going to be a great time, and I
Yeah.
mean
What's
it's
the
good for the
downside?
resume. Yeah, exactly. What's the downside? So that's really that's amazing. That's really cool.
Yeah.
It was a very cool way of shooting. Yeah, it was really, really immersive, and also amazing for myself too, as doing a lot of the art department, and also just when you live on when you actually live on the set. You can go back over blocking at night or whatever. I was sleeping in the living room that you see in a lot of in a lot of our scenes. Going, oh, okay, well, maybe we can move that couch and stage it slightly differently or whatever. So it was a
Well,
pretty cool, immersive way to do it.
yeah, and so on that note, I'd love to just talk about directing this movie a little bit because like earlier you said it kind of goes against traditional directing norms in a way. And because basically, to give some context here, this is a found footage movie, but there are what, four different sections in the movie, and therefore like four different points of view and different cameras. And I love the way that you tie it all together, especially like up until the very final shot of the movie. And it's just really, it's very, very well structured. What's really cool about the visual style of the movie as well is that the cameras are different, and so the movie looks different in the different sections. Like some is like, it's like a 15-year-old, like Sony, like a more of a camcorder type thing, and then you have like the DSLR that the movie starts with, and et cetera, right? And back all the way back to the 90s, like the Super 8 millimeter video cameras or whatever it is. So that's all really great, but then tell us a bit more about how you structured the scenes, because with these found footage movies, the takes are often quite long. So there's a lot of coordination between the actors, like the blocking of the actors and the camera. And you're often pulling off like really cool gags with Clara, the possessed girl, and blood gags and stuff. How did you tackle all of that?
Well, living on the set was a big part of that because it meant we got to do a ton of staging beforehand, tons of rehearsal with the cast, and it was yeah. There are some very long, complicated takes in that, and it just took time. Luckily, half the some of the cast were working on the crew, and the cast kind of doubled up in places. So
Captive audiences.
yeah, very captive. So I mean, every place had its own unique challenge. The physicality of what the camera was doing, and how Hunter was operating, or Hewlett operated on some.
Yeah, like even in the basement, I just noticed when the priest is, searching for Clara, the camera follows him around. You have us panning to the left, and that's super spooky. All of those just like lingering shots on the woods or into the darkness. It's great at building suspense. But then also, I guess like the camera isn't. It's not an objective point of view. It's not the audience or anything like that. Like we are the other priest in that moment. So you have to, I guess, think as far from a directing standpoint, like you can't do what Jack wants. It really has to do what that character's
Yeah,
doing, right?
okay, that's a great point. So when we were in prep, Hunter and I spent a ton of time coming up with. Because obviously we're not an objective observer. The character is a camera. So to hit all the story beats, I had to think, why is this other priest filming it, or why is this kid filming it, or so that just took a ton of rehearsal and thinking about the character, or sorry, the camera as a character as opposed to, well, I mean, a camera. We sort of had to start thinking of the camera as a cast member. I think that was the way to do it, while at the same time sneaking in an actual aesthetic too, because you can't really everything in the film is placed and set decked and color coordinated, and if you just get a camera and walk around a hallway, it doesn't feel like found footage. You have to do so much set deck to make it feel normal. Because if you just film normal, it falls out from beneath the bottom for some reason.
And the audience is looking for clues in what they're seeing on camera too, right? Like what is the camera going to see that maybe the person holding the camera isn't seeing at that moment? And those kinds of little tricks that get thrown in there, but that has to be incredibly intentional. And then that also means that if there's an error, like if you've neglected something, the audience is going to treat everything they see on camera as if you intended it to be there. So if you leave a gum wrapper there, then it has to mean something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was a really interesting sort of discovery to make, especially when we started watching dailies. I think there's only one or two scenes where I go, ugh, that was a little found footagey. But for the most part, quite intentionally designed in terms of everything that's in the frame. Especially in a movie where the information, like you're saying, Anthony, is so limited. Like we wound up cutting most of the exposition that we did have in the script and the titles that explained anything. So so what you get in the frame is that's pretty much it, man. Like it was laborious and intentional, and the camera had to be the character, which took a little extra thought and a bit of acting. I'm actually glad we had an actor as our DP too. So they sort of intuitively figured out how the camera was going to move based on the character, which was really helpful.
What I liked about your approach, as opposed to some other found footage films that I've seen before, was I really was straining to see what the camera wasn't seeing.
Mm,
Like I felt like I wanted to know, like, what's just to the right now, or
Mhm.
what's just to the left. Like, please pan, because I know there's something there, but I need to. But you're not showing it, and that I think that requires a lot of discipline, almost to not be expository, because you could flood the zone, so to speak, with so much visual information, but it's what you're not seeing that's actually really compelling. Like you're searching for something, and then it's you that the camera just has to turn in order for you to get it, but you're not get it. The camera won't do that because the person running the camera doesn't know that they're supposed to turn. It almost, or it
Yeah.
feels as though that's what's going on.
Some of my favorite shots in the film are like from Oliver's POV when he's like looking around at things and he's finding things in the forest, or you notice that the parents are getting a little spooked, but he doesn't recognize that they're being spooked. And he's just like, I'm having fun. And just like the things that are going on, you can hear them talking about things that parents do talk about when they probably get very worried, and but trying not to show that their kid that they're worried is like some of the most intent like spooky moments for me in the film.
I think we found we were shooting it like everyone understands like the Jaws principle, like don't show the shark. But and we went into it knowing that for sure, but we still had a lot of scares and moments and stuff planned where you did see glimpses of the monster or more tense moments. And we've shot them. They were in versions of the edit. But I think as we started to whittle it down, the real power of found footage, much to some viewers' chagrin, is really cutting out and never panning to it. The real scare in found footage is your limited POV, and that's when it works best. So we did kill a lot of darlings and leave as much as we could up to the imagination.
Speaks to the ability to make something look fantastic and look and stand out on its own as a feature film on the budget level that you're working with too, because you can use that restriction of not you don't have the money to do a big elaborate set piece.
Yeah, I was surprised by just how effective that principle is. Okay, because it's something you understand. It's something to tell you in film school, but it wasn't until we were out in that basement or out in the middle of the woods that we really did feel that. As in, it really does have to be what you do feel. Like we've watched a ton of like weird cryptid videos and YouTube things of people catching glimpses of stuff in the woods or whatever, and most of it isn't obviously not it's not real, but there is a vibe to it. And so we wanted to capture that voyeuristic feeling of just catching a leg and or a brief glimpse or something like that. Voyeuristic was a word that we brought up a lot, or accidental. And it's really difficult, like we were saying, because it's as a director, like you were saying, Ken, like you want to create a cinematic moment, you want to create a
Mhm.
beautiful frame that's powerful, but it really became about finding the imperfections and the dirtier shots and take everything you've learned and then just try to break it. And when we were screening the film too in different cuts, people would give us notes to try and make it more like a movie, but it would make it less scary.
Mhm.
So not only were we going against our own instincts, but we had to go against the audience instincts, which was a hard line to find.
Yeah.
That's interesting to hear the audience kind of, or the reaction you were getting was, oh, give us more, movie, less story.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's definitely couple reviews online too, where people are like, "There's no ending," or or like, I didn't get. How come you didn't show this or whatever?" And then they'll be like, "But the found footage wasn't very realistic or whatever." And you're like, "Who films the monster, man? Everyone's shitting their pants, running as fast as
Yeah.
possible." So there was this sort of cognitive dissonance which we had to become aware of as well as find the line of pleasing the audience of just how much do you have to give them so that they're scared in a fun way without turning on you. Yeah, so that was a surprisingly difficult filmmaking challenge.
In terms of post-production, I'd love to talk about like the timeline, but just to again put things in perspective, how long was your pre-production?
So we shot the short in October. Jack came up with the idea in like probably early November of like we got to do the feature, and we were shooting it by March.
Oh
So
wow, that's
we
fast.
were we were booking it,
And this
and
was
we were
all
like,
written. None of it was improvised, right?
It's all written.
all
It's
written,
all written.
all
Wow.
written.
So you wrote the script, you went into pre-production. By March, you were shooting for 11 days and
Yeah,
then got into post. And overall post lasted how long would you say?
lasted a lot longer than we anticipated. I think, just because how fast we were like breakneck speed uh, on development, pre-production, and all
This
that.
movie will be done by June. Like, yeah.
Yeah, we can get this done. It's gonna be so quick. Me and Jack were on like this, like, let's just keep going faster, faster, faster. And it was really Hunter who came in, was like, look, we made this beautiful film. We got it done in this time. Let's take our time with this and really finesse this, all this stuff we've accomplished, and like really work it out into a very beautiful, succinct film. And then coming together and finding like horrors needs a really good sound design to like build up those scares, and finding
Huge.
Eric, who was our sound
And
designer.
brilliant sound design. Like it's really,
Yeah.
really, really good.
Unbelievable.
And I watched the movie with my AirPods, and so it was like especially creepy because I couldn't hear anything else.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, really, truly fantastic job. Who was your sound designer?
Derek Simpson, who's a great sound designer. Everyone should hire him, and composer. He wound up doing a lot of the sort of more ethereal music pieces too. Yeah, so we wound up giving Hunter, our editor, and Derek, our sound designer, and Chris Kuhn, our visual effects editor and designer, quite a bit of time, and we sat on the cuts quite a bit. Again, our first cut was long and full with all sorts of other stuff, but we whittled it down, and I think we learned a lot of lessons about horror in the process. So it was sort of like a mini film school. It took us a while for sure, and we
Mhm.
had to shoot a couple pickups to finesse things. But I think we took advantage of the fact that there was no one. We didn't have a completion bond on us at the time or anything. So we took our time to really make and pull out the movie it had grown into, rather than rush it. And I don't know if we'll ever get that chance in post to learn those lessons ever again without someone breathing down our necks.
Hmm.
So we were lucky in that sense, and I'm really pleased with how that cut finally came out, and that we did take the time, and that we did talk about every single edit decision as the three, sometimes four or five producers there. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it was a very thorough post process.
Yeah, we were so lucky
It-
to find in that post process, we had people come on, and this has happened throughout the whole production. We'd have people come on, and then like because we were such low budget, they could scheduling conflicts would come in, we'd lose them, something would come up. This again was just the beginning of the strikes. So people weren't sure
Mm.
what's going to happen. They weren't sure if they're going to have. So everyone was kind of grabbing on what they could grab at that time. So we had different people come on and kind of say, "Oh, I'll do this," and then at last minute we'll drop out. We had some people in post do that as well, and we were so lucky to find Chris, who's this again finding people who are jack of all trades and who's a jackknife in that position. And he just came on, and we had some shots that we were like really like concerned, like how we're gonna tell this and how this will come across. And he showed us some of the things he was doing, and we're like, oh no, we're safe. Thank God we found Chris, because they're like, yeah, they're just amazing. And he just had like a knack for it and was so intuitive and so easy to work with, and was down to pretty much do anything we'd ask of him, and come up with some inventive ideas, I think, to like for Jack to ponder over.
We had a couple shots that were rough shoots. We were actually able to make them, like the tent shot is a great example. The tent kill at the end of the first act, that was an absolute nightmare to get.
A
Um,
very complicated shot.
it's
Hmm.
really, really complicated, and it was freezing. It was like a 12-hour day in the middle of the night. We had to hike into that location. That was my bad idea. I apologize to everybody. So we got the best that we could. I really do think we got the best that we could on the day, in the night, in the -7 or 10 or whatever weather. But then the working relationship we had with Chris and Post and Hunter, we massaged that tent shot into it is exactly what is written. I think that's my proudest shot in the whole film, because there's so many elements going on there. We have the Clara girl, the monster. We have, Jill running out of the tent into the freezing night, which she did like, I don't know, 20 times or whatever. We had rough terrain, filled with rocks. Our stunt guy was walking around with a flashlight, pulling out rocks and nails and whatever else from this lakeside. And we had the prosthetic, we had the antler that had to go into Hunter's back and he crawling out. And so there was so many elements. It looks kind of easy now that I see it in the film, and I go, I wish people knew how much of that
Yeah.
of a
Yeah,
goddamn
right?
I
that
watched that. I remember seeing that, thinking to myself, "Oh, this looks crazily easy," but I can feel just the tension of everybody probably on set that day just going, I go, "This is
it
this
was
is
awful.
a nightmare."
It was a nightmare. Yeah, it was. But again, it's that whatever type A fun, type 2 fun. What is it when it sucks?
Type
Anyway,
2.
type 2. Yeah, so it's type 2 fun. 12 hours, so cold, and we were filming some of that tense stuff, and when we were watching dailies at 6:30 a.m. in the morning the next day, Hewlett and Hunter and I were like, we could have filmed some of this like in a parking lot, like nobody knows. Like there's some of this inside the tent and everything, and we were like, why did we go out
Yeah,
into the wilderness and keep everyone up for an
yeah,
ungodly amount of time and hike in? But I think it actually does show, because that tent shot is the closest place to sort of where the lore of the film actually took
yeah.
place, where there were sightings of Pharaoh Cave way back when.
And
So
to your credit, it doesn't look like anybody's cold in that film or in that part. So if it was -7, it looked like looked like it was springtime in BC.
and there's a shot where Hunter is showing them how to fly cast, and he falls into the water, and it looks like a really pretty beautiful day, but it's so cold. It's just hovering around like above zero, maybe 3 or 4 degrees. We were
Yeah.
shooting, and Hunter was like, "This is bullshit, man. Like everyone should know how cold that fall was."
How many
Like,
takes was it?
yeah, that was one take. Yeah, he was
Yeah,
like,
One take,
I hope
saved the
so.
day.
I hope
Yeah,
so. That's a human rights violation after that, right?
yeah.
yeah, luckily he was a producer, so we just sort of snuck
Mm.
that past the union a little bit there. But yeah, we want everyone to know how difficult that was.
Well, you made
Perfect.
it look easy, so,
It's now
there's a
immortalized.
testament
Thank
to
you.
your skill. That's great. And you invited me to an earlier like test screening. In that discussion, I just remember when talking about sound design, there were notes in the room, and maybe this was one of my notes or whatever, but it was like, oh, it would be nice to hear this type of thing. But then your answer to that was that, well, that would make it more like the cinematic movie experience, but really, like, we can't hear certain things. We can't hear Clara more clearly. Like, it has to be through the door. It has to be, there's certain sound design elements that we have to adhere to make this world feel real and make it really feel like a found footage film. And I thought that that was another really interesting way to design the sound and the score of this movie.
That was a really great job by Derek Simpson, the mixer and the designer who did the sound there. We spent hours kind of going through just how, if you go full truthfulness to it, like if you go full verisimilitude, it's just not going to sound very great. But if so, he found a brilliant balance of proximity mixing so that we can all the characters feel like they are interacting with the camera, with the coming and the going, volumes in terms of how close they are, whether they're behind, that sort of stuff he did a great job with. And then blending in the sort of magical realism of just how loud that demon character's voice is and how that works in the actual space. It took a lot of notes. I think going into found footage, we were like, it's gonna be easy. It's gonna be an easy sound design, right? Like make it a little futzy, and it'll sound like kind of scratchy and cool, and everyone will love it. And then we got into post for the sound design and went, oh boy, okay, because it's not like you're creating a base level beautiful cinema.
Mhm. It's
Yeah,
again another restrained. You're sort of holding your back from trying to make it good. in a way where or you're trying to make it
Absolutely.
too polished because again, like you like when you're listening to it, you're just like, I can't hear what's going on over there. I need to know what's going on over there.
I know, and I find myself doing it too, having sat through so many mixes where I'm still going in and being like, "What's that character saying? What did I write there? Like, I gotta hear it."
Mhm.
So I think, as frustrating as it was, that was another huge learning experience, and you have to credit Derek with a lot of brilliant choices on creating that really immersive feel.
From watching the film, it's sort of storytelling by omission, and it's a sensual experience where you have to pay attention to what you're not getting in order to get into it. And the problem is you're not letting the audience relax enough to just go, okay, I'm just going to wait for the next scene to happen, because you're thinking to yourself, it's something's going to happen soon. I know it, or something's going to happen here, and you're teasing the audience in a way.
Yeah, thank you. That was yeah, storytelling by omission. That's a great way of putting it, because that is really it. It's what you sort of keep on the edge of the frame as opposed to
Mhm.
frame.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But in the sound too, like what you're not, what you pull out.
Yeah. And so post production lasted until last year. At some point, you locked the movie. What happened after that? So the movie's done. You're happy with it. Run us through festival circuit, marketing, distribution, what that journey has been like. Because obviously you didn't have a distributor attached to this before you started shooting the movie. Did you have something in mind in that regard?
I think in hindsight, that was one of the things that we could improve upon going into the next film that we ever do is just like really thinking about marketing and sales in development, in pre-production, and how we can go in this and better promote the film that you're making. And we didn't have a real direction of like what we wanted to do. We knew we wanted to put it in a bunch of festivals and to see, like, test the waters with it and see how it's going to do, and then hopefully that someone would come along and just see the amazingness of the film that it is. And so we put it into a bunch of like pretty well known horror festivals, like all the Overlook and Fright Fests and a bunch of other ones. And like you never know, on like every year it's always different of like who's involved with the programming there. And so just reaching out to your contacts there and just talking to people who like say love the film and will get back to you and say this is a great film, but like it just doesn't fit with our theme. We're finding that this year it's a lot more like body horror is really in. So we're programming towards more of this or programming towards more of that. So it really didn't find its footing in the major festivals, but we found out that like these smaller like horror festivals that were just kind of off the peripheral loved it. Like we were just getting like from Dead North in the UK. Josh there really loved the film that we had and had nothing but great things to say about that. And Mountains of Horror Festival in Mexico, Alfredo Hernandez, he loved it as well. And from there, it just kind of like started blossoming out.
The movie really struggled at home in Canada to find its footing. If there was like something to say to anyone who wants to go out and make a feature, it would be think twice about found footage, because it's such a fascinating medium and such an interesting challenge. And it did help us shoot faster, obviously. It's such a weary genre. Horror audiences are so hurt, I think, by some of the sloppiness of found. There is some brilliant found footage, like no
Do you
question.
find that you're often compared to Blair Witch? Like that's the gold standard. So if it's not Blair Witch, not good for me.
Yeah, the Blair Witch comparison, which was purely an aesthetic thing.
Ours was set in the woods. They were set in the woods.
Yeah, every found footage though, man, is so if you go out and make a found footage movie, be prepared for everyone to write it off right off the bat, because there's been so many Blair Witch knockoffs, etc. And anyone can use the principles to make a feature film, but it's not necessarily effective. So we found a lot of genre weariness, but luckily the film started picking up overseas, especially in England. And I think the nihilism, for some reason, I think thematically we didn't hit the fun horror category
Right.
that a lot of festivals I think sort of wanted. They wanted more gore, bigger thrills, and what we gave them was a non-linear mystery, yeah, non-linear linear mystery movie that you have to put together yourself. It's not especially gory, but luckily that did resonate with audiences outside of North America, which led us to distribution, which led us. Though we did talk to companies like Epic and stuff here in North America, down in LA and whatnot, but a lot of those companies were also already had their lo-fi found footagey. Every distributor has like one. So we did talk to a bunch of, distributors and they're like, yeah, film's great, but we don't need another one of these. But luckily Black Mandela, the company that did pick us up was like, we don't have one and we like it.
Yeah,
So
Michael from Black Mandala really loved our film. And because like he was a sponsor in a lot of those festivals, he kind of like those peripheral festivals, like if you're making a film, it's also good to see who is also sponsoring these festivals because you never know how they connect together. And so his company sponsored a bunch in the UK and in South America. And so he started seeing the connection that our film kept popping up at these festivals. He's like, oh my God. And so Alfredo from Mountains of Horror Festival was like, hey, do you want to meet these people? And he was like, yeah, I hear they're doing really well. And
Mhm.
so we kind of
So
connected
you were
from there.
generating buzz within this like mini festival circuit,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
got you the attention of a distributor. That's really interesting. So the distributor conversations that you were having, were those mostly at the festivals, or did you reach out to separate distributors just saying, "Hey, we have a movie, we want to try to make a deal. What do you think?" How did that work?
it was everything, right? Hewlett, there was some cold calls, there was word of mouth, there was just introductions from people we knew. We had initially talked about getting a sales agent, but didn't go with that route. So we sort of wandered down. We had no clue about distribution. Like the whole learning process was very steep on that front. So I think we tried everything in our books just to try to get into meetings, and every meeting we'd have, we'd be like, okay, there's a new piece of information. Let's write that one down for next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
But luckily, I think it was just word of mouth from smaller festivals that got us in the room with Black Mandela. So design your movie to get into to stand out in the festivals because that's where you're going to build your value. That was, I think, our big lesson.
Yeah, and just like using your network, like again, from begin to the concept to the ending, it was all a part of our network. Like it's who you know, who you met along the way, who can help you open the door because you never know who was going to be that linchpin that will push you off into different directions. Like we were talking to a bunch of different distributors from different people that we knew and different contacts, and they'd always set us up for the next meeting and the next one, and like that would just get our network bigger and bigger. And so now people are knowing about us and are putting out the good word that we have this film and it's great. And then like even through like casting and all of this, like our cast was all through who are amazing. We're all through like connections that we made and a lot of connections that Jack made through his animation, like sort of realm, and just bringing these people out and just finding the right people and yeah, find the right crew.
Yeah, it's really about the community
Yeah.
and building up that community and
Mhm.
relying on it. And yeah, that's really interesting.
Sorry to go back to that community. Funny enough, our colorists came from UCAN
That's
because we
true.
got Allie.
Yeah, you had Allie, who I had worked with on a couple shorts, and then Allie was our, well, for context, Cole and I produced a movie, The Duke of Bor, and Allie was our DP and colorist. So yeah, it's just
Oh
like,
wow.
and then through another short film that I directed, I met Ilya, who Cole you know, and
Yeah.
then Ilya and Allie now work together on their own shorts, and like they're doing their thing. So it's just like you're just passing people around, you
Yeah,
know.
there's a good crew and good vibes around.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it's all about. So, what's next then for the film? You have a distributor. What's going on? Where are we at?
Now it finishes its festival run over the up until the spring, and then around in the spring it'll start going out for sales and doing its marketing, and that'll be a whole new ballpark for us to learn how to try and hit a ball. Yeah, so that'll be a big learning experience with the distributor and how they decide to market it. It could be different or similar to how we've pictured it. So yeah, it's about to enter its next phase of sales, and we'll see where it finds home, or whether what streaming platform it lands on, or we don't know. This is the
This is
next
the
step.
great unknown right now, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. We'll be pleased when it is definitely more accessible in whatever way. I think there's something sort of purgatory, sort of like torturous about having your film and sort of in this limbo stage because you're like, it's done, but it's just waiting, between it screens like once a month or longer between festivals, building value, which is great, but you're seeing it at home being like, I made a movie, I want people to see it
Yeah.
as we head into the great unknown here. So we're excited to get it out there. We're really
Yeah.
excited.
Yeah, the
Well,
movie's not really done until it's in front of audiences, and then you can kind of say, okay, well now we can talk about it when we have social functions. People there might have already seen it, and they can ask us about it and talk about the experiences and so on. It becomes a conversational thing and a community building thing. But right now, like you said, it's kind of it's in the world, but it's being seen exclusively right now.
Seen exclusively, yeah. And you kind of, as the director or as a producer on it, I think Hewlett, you probably, I don't know, we've talked about this before, but the film kind of takes on a new life of its own as soon as you start shooting and as soon as the actors start bringing it to life and as soon as you start working with a feature arc. I found it's almost alarming how quickly and organically the film starts to evolve into what it's going to be. And you can't necessarily control that. You kind of open the pen doors and let the herd stampede out and hope they come back. And you can kind of like coax and guide it into the best version of what you envision, but there's so many other factors. The universe is all entropy. So it does start evolving into this new sort of story that comes alive. And that, first day on set was a bit of panic seeing seeing that for sure in my own head when we got back to dailies. I was like, oh my God, this is insane until you get wise enough to start learning how to not control it but guide it. And then as we head into distribution, dude, the movie takes on a whole new life of its own as other people interpret it, which is also sort of blowing. When other reviews or stuff pops up, or you're going to get some different interpretations when we have so little exposition, and sort of people pull out a couple of different things thematically or sort of different theories, and then so as of now, it's not really our movie anymore. It's sort of it turns into whatever the audience wants it to be, which is cool and surprising too. That was sort of a learning about distribution and then seeing the reviews and seeing the screenings, seeing your work leave the building. It's like I would imagine it's like you have a kid and then you send them out into the world and
Yeah,
then
your baby's growing up.
hey, your baby's growing up too, and then people come back to you and you're like, I hate your kid. Or I love your kids. You have a really confusing and scary child. But
For
so
those
that's
who haven't seen the movie, that's what you need to go see now.
so that was a big thing in distribution too, and the festival circuit is learning. I mean, you do have to learn to let go because you don't have any other choice. It's not like you can email everyone who's about to watch it and be like, I'd just like you to consider like a couple things before watching this movie. Uh,
Before you go in,
yeah,
you should know.
that it was really cold, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that was a big learning experience, and we're excited to see what it turns into, if anything. Hopefully something likes our child.
well, this is great. As we sort of wrap things up here, I just want to say also, like, once the movie's released, we should do a follow-up conversation and talk about reception and what it's like to finally have it out into the world. Question?
Yeah, so given all of this, if you had to talk to your former selves, your pre idea, hey, we should make a movie together selves, and give yourself advice, what advice would you give yourselves?
It's just about who you want to make the film with, finding the right people that you want to settle down with, because kind of with these people for better or worse for like next 5 years, and like you have some up and downs, but once you find the right people, it makes it so much easier and so much better. Like if you find the right people to work with along the way, you're gonna find, yeah, some people are not really living up to your expectations. But if you have your core group that you know you can rely on, that you know you can trust, and you can lean on each other when things get tough, then you're golden. Like the filming process makes it so much easier when you can like have those people in there. So always just like make sure you know who you're getting into filming with, because it's not just like you go out, shoot, you're done. It's more than that.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. Like as a director or producer or as a writer or whatever, you don't make the movie, the community makes the movie. You need people that absolutely love it, and anything short of that, you're going to find kinks in the chain. So finding your people is was a huge lesson for us, and the only reason we got to pull it off, I think. And then trusting your script, like as a director, looking back, this first time feature director there. I think trusting your gut and trusting your script, because you spend however long writing it, staring at your screen, as uncomfortable as it is. And then you get to the day and there's adrenaline and other factors and all these crazy things that are trying to interrupt you. But you can always just go back to what you wrote when you were calm. And I think for myself that was probably the biggest lesson, was no matter all, no matter how crazy it's all going, stick to your plan, stick to your script, and then trust your producer. I was times I had no clue what was going on. Like Hewlett was making everyone show up on time and in the woods. Trust your producer and trust your trust your script was a big lesson. Like big, I thought it was
Great.
going to be much bigger, because you can get so I have to go back to the car sometimes and just be like, okay, look at one page. All you have to do is get this one page right. Like that's it. You don't have to worry about whether so and so's freaking out or all this other stuff. Just get your page right. I know that's essentially saying, "Hey, just do your job." But sometimes it takes a bit of a reminder.
Mhm.
That was a surprising lesson, because we all think of ourselves as professional and stuff, but all these other factors wear you down throughout the day, and you're living in overalls and not sleeping and watching dailies at 6:30 in the morning. I think for any artist, just going back and remembering to trust that script and get that script vetted before you go, and then you're going to be well suited. And to trust your producer. You have to trust your producer. Yeah,
Wow.
those were big lessons.
Yeah, it's amazing. Those are two great pieces of advice. I totally agree. And yeah, especially with an indie film, a micro budget feature like this at $30,000, it's not like you have a ton of money to go back and do reshoots or, fix things in post. So spending time in pre-production and getting that script right, getting your plan together. And again, like no plan survives contact with the battlefield, right? As they say. But you have to have that plan so that you can throw it away and improvise because it's still in your head. You still know what you want to do. And sometimes you just take another look at it and go from there. So this
Mhm.
has been fantastic, guys. This has been so informative. It's been super fun.
Yeah. Thank you for having us. This is great.
Yeah,
Thank you both
yeah.
so much.
Thanks for talking about our film.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure. It's special for us to get to talk about it. So thank you.
Yeah, that's great. And I think too, talking about it from a production standpoint, from an indie standpoint, obviously the movie's not released, so anybody listening to this, hasn't been able to see it, but the people listening to this podcast are the ones who are right now in pre-production or about to start making their movie. And so everything that you've mentioned is just like there's so many valuable
Mhm.
nuggets and tools here to use for other people moving forward. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, just one note on that. And for anyone who is listening and wanting to start out your indie film, whether it be a short or a feature or whatever, just do it. Just do it. Like that was we got more people excited and involved when we were saying, we're making this film regardless, no matter what. Like you could pitch in some money, sure, but no matter what, this film's getting made, and people seem to resonate with that and come out, and then you hold yourself accountable to make this film and just get out there because you're just gonna do it.
Yeah, that's a
That's
really
great.
great point. That worked for us all along the way. Just a
Yeah.
wild-eyed look that we're like, we're gonna do this no matter what. Whether we start with $10 or 30 grand or whatever we're starting with, we're doing it.
The specter of inevitability sort of
Mhm.
draws.
Yeah,
I love
it
it.
was contagious. It really worked for us.
Well, thank you both so much. Yeah, this is a great note to end on.
Thank you.
And how was that for you?
Oh, it's great. I mean, I learned a lot. I'm amazed at what those guys managed to pull off. Having seen the film now, and look, it's really well executed. It's spooky, it's suspenseful, downright scary at times. They made it look easy, even though it was clearly a very difficult shoot, having 11 days, a tiny crew, trying to manage all of these different pieces. But they really just did a great job, and learning more about how they did it and how they weren't afraid to just go for it. That was really inspiring.
I think my biggest takeaway, aside from just the sheer gumption of just deciding to greenlight their own film and go ahead and just do it without waiting for anybody to give them permission or anything like that, is what both Jack and Cole said at the end, which along the lines of, you really have to pick your team well, because especially in the world of independent film, you really are joined with them for the duration, not just for the pre-production, the production, and so on. But you really need them to need everybody to be rowing in the same direction, and you have to really put the time and effort into finding the right group of people, the sort of Swiss Army knife, as they kept saying, that of crew that can come in and help you make films.
Yeah, finding those like-minded people that are willing to go above and beyond, basically for no money, because they love doing it. That's so important, and it's hard. But when you find these people, though, you stick with them, right? You have your go-to people. I have my go-to people. Cole and Jack have theirs, and often they're the same people. To be honest, like we talked about
Yeah.
in the interview, we're all working together in some way, even though we're making different films. We're all working together as this community, and it's just great to see. So, as we mentioned in our first episode, every week we're going to be highlighting an indie film crowdfunding campaign that got our attention. And my pick this week is a short film called Echo. It's a Vancouver-based short by co-writers and directors Megan Pita Hill and Roxanne Fernandez. They're looking to raise $10,000 for production, and as of this recording, they've raised just over $4,000, so just over 40%, and they have just less than 40 days to go. I think this is a really important story to tell, as it's centered on a young woman with an eating disorder, something that affects so many people, especially young women and girls today, and it's an issue that the filmmakers know personally. On their campaign page, they say, while the short film is a standalone story, it is part of a larger universe explored within a feature that we are currently developing. In partnering with the Looking Glass Foundation, we hope this film inspires conversations, provides resources, and is a bridge to recovery for those feeling unheard. So it's a very personal, very important story for them. And there's clearly a future here where they're using this as a proof of concept to get a feature off the ground later on. So we wish the team good luck. All of the information for their campaign is going to be in our show notes. Anthony, what's your pick this week?
Yeah, my pick this week is a film called Nomad, and it's being made in New York City. And here's the long and short of it. At the end of time, a nomad goes on a journey to reclaim it. This is a sci-fi fantasy short, and it's a story for a generation seeking to reconcile its past while envisioning a better future. And what I found interesting about it is that it's being filmed in using the volume, using the virtual production technology at NYU. And again, this is a brand new technology, but it is a fascinating opportunity, I think, with virtual production for independent film, because as costs of technology come down, it will become more and more an avenue for you to make films, and to make films like science fiction films, like that look amazing, or just you don't have to travel halfway around the world to film a film. So the concept of the short is really cool. It's tackling the concepts of grief and closure, striving to tell a poignant and empathetic tale through the use of visual storytelling and virtual production. I'm just excited to see what they do with it.
That's it for this week's episode of Off the Lot. We want to hear from you. If there are any topics you want covered or any questions you'd like answered, please email us at podcast.offthelot@gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd. Our handles are in the show notes. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe, and we will see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks again, Ken, and have a great week.
Take care.